Hi, Ray Walkinshaw here at Grand Prix Chiba 2015. And I'm with the all-time Magic artist greats, Mark Tedin. Mark, you've been responsible for some of the very iconic cards of Magic's history, things like Chaos Orb, Brain Geyser, Mana Drain, Necropotence even, Time Vault. Take us back to the start. Where are you from and what made you decide to become an artist?
Well, my older brother Christopher was an artist himself, and I always wanted to do what he was working on. So I started drawing myself, and I just picked it up and kept drawing through high school and on through college at in Spokane, St. Louis. I got a master's degree in painting, and then just made a sort of a side jaunt into role-playing games and card games. And Magic was one of the first projects that I'd worked on, besides like some role-playing games that Wizards of the Coast was producing at the time. So my friend Anson Maddox, who was also a Magic artist, we grew up together in Sitka, Alaska. Eventually moved to Seattle. Started working on like those projects, and Magic was actually one of the first projects we worked on. Some of the earlier cards, you were saying that they were sort of iconic. They were iconic by accident, really. I was Jesper Meerfors, the art director at the time. He was actually reading names of cards over the phone, which is a very sort of not a typical style of art direction. But I would just go, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me take that one. Even if they were just horribly misspelled, or if they were going to be, recast with a different name later on. So I picked ones that just sort of sounded interesting, that they seemed to have evoke an image in my head almost instantly. So usually those are the ones I grabbed, and they often were red and black cards, and sometimes they were also very powerful cards. And some of them just happened to be iconic by accident.
I mean, I guess if you pick the powerful cards, they'll be the ones that people remember. So when you started on this project, did you have any idea what you were in for?
Not really. I mean, we had worked on some role-playing games, but there wasn't really a lot of coverage. The year after the game was produced, of course, they took it to a Gen Con in the Midwest. It was in a different city at the time. And they brought a lot of artists who were doing work for the game to that Gen Con. I wasn't at that one, but I was at the one afterwards. And the first year, the reviews were very good, but by next year, it had taken over a large section of the floor. But at the time, the appeal was having a little miniature portfolio of artwork that we could take around with us. We really didn't think that the game itself would take off as well as it did, but we were very surprised. And the first time that I was at a signing session, my arm hurt for days, because it was just not used to signing that many cards. Now I've had it replaced by piano wire and bionics, so it feels much better now. So it was a big surprise, but it just took off for years and years, and it's still even 22 years plus later, it's still growing.
Did you ever imagine that putting paint and brush to paper would get you in touch with so many fans all over the world? Tell us about the travel that you've done through Magic.
Well, I never expected to go to countries for Japan or Australia, but just because they're very distant. I had been to Europe, for school once or twice, but I had not expected to be taking these many trips and being in touch with the fans. Actually, just having fans to begin with was sort of a big change for me. I started receiving cards in the mail, and I was sending them back out. I was like, hey, people like my work. People really like my work. So that was a great thing, and it's great to be in touch with a lot of people. Over the years, I've been to Japan. I think Japan by itself, it must be at least 10 times. Now, never in my life would I thought I would be at one country 10 times, but here I am at Chiba, I think, for the second time, and yeah, it's great. I still don't know the language very well, but I'm trying.
Like, I totally hear you. So, have you done much work outside of Magic?
I teach part time at an illustration school, but for the most part, I do illustrations for games, a few mobile games lately. Of course, there's Magic, the role-playing games for Wizards of the Coast, and there actually were quite a few other CCG games that Wizards were producing at the time. They're not doing that so much anymore, but eventually some companies were folded into Wizards, so I was doing work for D&D, still do that once in a while, but we did some other games that were later sort of folded into the family. But not as many like card games as before, of course. Yeah, I'm still looking for illustration work, around. So it gets varied. I'm even doing a book cover for my brother who wrote a fantasy novel. So yeah, it's very varied and really unique.
So is that the same brother that you were inspired to become an artist? Because he's now a writer.
No, that's actually my other brother. He's always been a writer and a world builder of sorts. But he finally put pen to paper and wrote a really good novel. So I'm making the cover for that right now, or I should be.
Speaking of the artist brother, how does he feel about your success?
Well, my brother Christopher, he works in Chicago at he's mostly teaching at a 3D college, he was very happy that I was doing fantasy work. He'd always been interested in doing fantasy work himself, but his type of work is more specific. He does more ceramics, more painting, but he also works a lot in 3D and in computers. He definitely followed a different track. He works in watercolors and, of course, like I said, in clay. Beyond that, he also teaches almost full-time, actually. I'm more of a part-time teacher.
It's very cool. Now, your art style, to me, seems quite high contrast. Is that a conscious thing that you developed early on, or is it just how you saw things?
I think it's deliberate. In college, I learned very, a wide range of fine art techniques that I applied towards fantasy. So it's not too much different from from doing work from life or from observation. It's just that I'm the more life work that you do, the more you're sort of able to apply it towards fantasy subjects. Because there aren't really good models for those sort of floating around in front of you, so you have to do the best with what you have. So yeah, I tend to try to boost the contrast as much as possible. Maybe put a lot of variation in the value, and then color considerations are usually separate. If the black and white sketch is working okay, then usually the color will work okay. So as long as the drawing is strong, usually the paintings will be stronger as well.
That makes sense. So over the last 20 plus years for Magic, you've illustrated nearly 200 cards by the last count.
Yes.
Do you have any personal favorites?
Well, actually, the one that was reprinted for this show for Modern Masters is Emrakul, and I was on a concept team for Zendikar, and being able to handle some of the lineages, as they call them. I got to tackle the big boy, the big
the biggest Eldrazi possible.
Yeah, the daddy of that family, and I also got to do or at least one of the art pieces for it. So even though I did the concept work, I was able to do kind of even a little bit more of a reimagination on it and play with it a little bit more, which was a lot of fun. And I got to do a large piece, so instead of the usual small ones. So yeah, I like that one the best.
Fantastic. Which would you say is your fans' favorite?
I guess it depends on the country. I guess in the U.S., people like Juzam Jin a lot. Some of the alpha cards are usually pretty popular. But it's kind of hard to say, like, if there's a worldwide favorite. I guess in Japan, actually, the Eldrazi is pretty popular. There are a few other cards that people have a tendency of sort of liking, but they're kind of all over the place.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I have a couple of favorites myself. One of my commander decks has a tendency to have some quite aggressive fast artifact mana, of which you illustrated. And if you don't mind, I'd like you to sign them for me now, if that's okay.
I'd love to. And I've got the pen right here.
It's as if we planned this. Sol Ring and Mana Vault.
Now, Sol Ring is probably the one I alter the most. I'm not going to tell you what pictures I put on them, but I've probably done a lot of drawings on this one.
Well, look, I'd like to thank you, Mark, for taking the time to speak with us. It's been a thrill and a pleasure, and an honor even. It's Ray Walkinshaw here for Mark Tedin at Grand Prix Chiba 2015.